Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Red West, Lost Focus. Hi, Gun. Hi, City of Angels girl. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We'll start today the same way that Elvis walked into a dojo, with the crucible of a warrior.
Born in the fire, Evansville aflame. Hammer in hand, carved out his name. 16 and airborne boots in the dirt. Jumping through walls, unbaptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel. Champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, a warrior's no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the map, but he rolls with a roll. Steer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forging Hank's domain. 30 throws, not dances, a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shoot oh elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every cater name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no one played tame. Saw came in, fist like a stone. Said put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you crawl, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the map, but he rose with the roll. Steer his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it not on fame, but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline roots. A crucible, baby, not a stage or set. You earn every inch, every beat of sweat. Elvis hit the map, but he rolls with a roar. Steer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior. They burst through the fire, broke through the fear. The dojo legends and kings stood clear. Crucible of a warrior. Elvis was here.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear them straight from Red and from Elvis. We're going to jump right on into the phone call because we didn't hear any of it yesterday. We were doing a lot of backstory about Sonny. I think it was important that we heard that backstory, but now we got to get back into the main arena. And that's this phone call that's being recorded in October the 12th, 1976, to be specific. It's being recorded in Los Angeles at a hotel, California. Elvis is somewhere else. We don't really know. I'm assuming he's calling from Graceland. Somebody has given Elvis the number because in 1976, you didn't travel around with your phone number. You gave people the phone number where you were at because everything was a landline phone. So it was connected to a geographic spot. So Elvis is called, Red has recorded, and here we go. So Elvis has said something went wrong. And he's talking about the situation between Red and Sonny and Dave and everybody else because these other people were scared. There was a lot of tension in the air when Red and Sonny and Dave were around for at least a year, probably for 2 years, and Dave felt like it stretched back 3. So for a while, people had not been getting along. Elvis wraps that all up and doesn't lay blame on anyone. He just says something went wrong. That's very gracious of Elvis, especially under these circumstances. And then Elvis says, and that on top of the racquetball thing. So we know about the racquetball court. That's Presley Center Courts and Dr. Nick and Joe Esposito. They brought this fabulous deal to Elvis. But it wasn't about making money for Elvis. He didn't care about that. He thought this would financially benefit Joe Esposito and Dr. Nick. He thought it was something that they had come up with, that it was a great idea, and he did want to see them succeed at that, and he thought all he'd have to do is loan his name. Now it's turned into $1.3 million. No end in sight. There's another $3 million missing somewhere. It's all been spent. People are owed money. Elvis doesn't legally owe any of that money, but pressure is mounting. There's even been legal action taken towards Graceland. He hasn't told Red that, but Red knows about the racquetball thing. And how does Red know? Well, he doesn't know the specifics. He knows somebody was going around in Nashville collecting money using Elvis's name, but to put Red a little closer to the situation, he was playing racquetball with Elvis 5+ nights a week in some cases. I assume that's when he was in Memphis. But people saw Red in that company. I've even got, now this won't be Red specifically, but this will be Sonny. So we've got Sonny's ID from the International Las Vegas. That would have been sometime around 1969 or 1970. Saw this yesterday. So we have been looking at this call for several episodes. If you're new here and you want to see those other episodes, you can catch them on the live section of my channel. You just head back to Hillbilly Cat History and look for the live section, and then that'll show you all the available episodes. This is a badge that was given to Elvis that kicked off his desire to get the badge he got from President Nixon, and that he took Sonny into the Oval Office at the White House. And can you imagine what a huge favor that is for a friend? And he didn't have to take Sonny. Sonny had just showed up at the hotel where Elvis was, and Elvis was pulling up in a limousine to pick up Jerry Schilling, who was at that hotel. And Sonny just happened to be there at that moment because he had just arrived from the airport. He even had to leave his bags for the bellboy, the doorman, to make sure it got to his room. Because Elvis said, "Get in, Sonny, get in. We're going to the White House." So when Elvis was going to do big things and Sonny was running a little late, Elvis didn't forget about it. And then he gave him this badge, which was the one that kind of kicked everything off. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We saw this $1,500 check for Sonny. That was a bonus after a tour. You know, there were a lot of tours every year. Kind of thinking Sonny might have received a bonus similar to this after many of them. Plus, Elvis usually gave a Christmas bonus. We saw this beautiful ring that Sonny had a lovely story that went with it. And then he sold it in December 1977, just a few months after Elvis had passed away, just a year after he'd gotten $17,000 for writing a book about Elvis. There's also 1.3 million copies of his book that he gets 1.6 cents per copy from, that's sold in the year after Elvis's death. So it seems odd that he needed to get the money from the ring, but he let it go. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Now, this is what we didn't see yesterday. This is Elvis's racket and racquetball that he personally played racquetball with while he played with Sonny. And he gave these objects to Sonny. So these are the very items that Elvis used to play racquetball. Now, obviously, Elvis had other rackets, he had other balls. This isn't a immensely personal item of Elvis's. Possibly even less personal than the ring. But these were tools to Elvis. He used them as tools. He was trying to lose weight, stay in shape in order to get out there on stage. These were part of his career. Just not a part many of us ever saw. But they also represent this whole broken trust. This time that Sonny and Red took their eye off the ball. And now Elvis owes $1.3 million and he's trapped on a phone call with Red, who's recording. Let's get back to this phone
call. Expenses backfiring me. It's a little weird to me. It seemed like you could have cut somewhere else. I thought that was important for the organization, but I'm glad I finally found out I wasn't. Then I still got a little life left, and I'm gonna enjoy that. And
so Red starts to become very angry. Elvis has said it's a fact that we had to cut back, implying the expenses, that the three men were terminated because there truly are expenses that are being generated not just by their salaries, but by them being employed because of these lawsuits and these other things. There really are financial pressures. And Elvis also says, I had the feeling. Now, what kind of feeling is Elvis referring to? Well, he means, Red, you didn't want to be here. You were telegraphing to me that this was no fun for you. Like you just said, wasn't any fun anymore. Didn't want to be here. Have you ever worked with somebody that didn't want to be there? Because it is miserable. And that's what Elvis was feeling from Dave Hebler and Sonny West and Red West. They did not want to be employed anymore. Unless things were going to go the way that they wanted them to go. And that wasn't what was going to happen in the future. Taking care of business is about business. It's not about getting everything the way that you want it. You got to fit in the pleasure around the business. That's the whole reason that Elvis had TCB. And Red says, well, whatever you have to do, I told your daddy, you got to do what you got to do. So that's what Red said to Vernon. You got to do what you got to do. Now, does that mean I forgive you, Vernon, that it's been so great that you've employed me all this time? I'm very gracious to Elvis. Everything I have, I owe to Elvis. And I hope that in some point in the future, things are going better and we can all get back together. That is not what he meant when he said, you got to do what you got to do. He meant, hey, you're slapping me in the face, and that's what I feel, and now I'm angry. Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Jen. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here, too. So now Red's very, very angry, and he's becoming more angry as he talks. He says, if you got to cut down on expenses by firing me, it's a little weird to me. So Red thinks that it's weird that if you want to cut down on expenses, you stop spending the money. But what he's actually saying is that he thought if you were going to cut expenses, it wouldn't be him. Why would you get rid of Red? He says you could have cut somebody else. That's kind of cutthroat, right? Like, Red would have been okay with all of this if it had been somebody else. So if Red hadn't got fired and he'd been at Dr. Gotham's when Dave Hebler showed up with his gun and forced his way in by just opening the door and walking in, and then demanding to see Elvis so that he could be fired like a man, would Red have taken care of that situation and fired Dave like a man in that moment? Because that's kind of what Red's implying, is that you could have cut anybody else and I'd been okay with it. That kind of shows you how Red felt about the other people he was working with, too. Now, he's got two other guys that are possibly sitting with him listening to this phone call. I wonder if they've caught on that Red might have been okay if Elvis had terminated just them. And Red says, I thought that I was important to the organization. Now, when he says organization, what does he mean? What is this organization? The Elvis Presley Empire? No, it's Elvis Presley. He thought he was important to Elvis. And then Elvis let him go. Red felt his behavior could be anything, and Elvis would back him up and would never send him away. Even though all of them admit that they had been terminated multiple times in the past. It's like, this has already happened, and yet nobody ever went to write a book before. And Elizabeth says that Red was very greedy. He is the most selfish and such a crybaby. He's cried a little bit right here in this passage. That's true. And Elizabeth says that Red didn't care about anyone else. He would have been okay if anyone else got fired. He wouldn't have cared. I think that's exactly what he just told Elvis. I do believe that. That if it had been just Dave, well, Dave might be in prison right now because Red might have called the cops on him when he showed up at Dr. Gotham's house. Who knows? I don't think he'd be backing Dave to write this book if Red was still employed. I think Red would be calling whoever was writing the book the names that he's very upset at being called. And then Red says, I'm glad I found out that I wasn't, meaning important to Elvis Presley. This is the kind of thing that you say during a romantic breakup. I thought you loved me. Glad I found out now. And he says, I still got a little life left and I'm going to enjoy that. It's also what you say when you break up. It's vicious and nasty. And then Red says, and I'm still young enough to find something else, This is another thing that people say when they break up in a romantic relationship, that they're still young enough to find love out there from someone else. And therefore, you haven't hurt them by letting them go. And they screamed this in pain because you did hurt them. And so Red's telegraphing to Elvis that Elvis hurt him. I'm still young enough I can find something else, you know. But it was just cutting down expenses. I just couldn't understand that. And so Red has a beef that's similar to the one Dave Hebler has. Dave Hebler was mad because he didn't get fired in person by Elvis. He didn't get fired like a man. And Red is defining that as you lied to us about cutting down expenses, that this is not the actual reason. Now, Red's also saying he knows what the actual reason is. And he knows that Elvis avoided the actual reason because Red knows he caused the actual reason. And we heard in a much, much earlier episode before we got into looking at this phone call, we watched Sonny West and Dave Hebler the day after Elvis passed away in an interview. And they said something very, very similar. That they knew that the reason they got fired was not for expenses. And they hinted around that they did know the reason, but they brushed past it. And the reporters that were there were possibly the worst of all time because they never asked a decent follow-up question. They all revealed they had not read the book, so they could not ask decent follow-up questions. But Sonny and Dave kind of revealed they hadn't read the book either. So I guess, nobody in the press conference had read the book. It was a bit of a difficult press conference in that way, I had to think. But Red saying can't understand this cutting down expenses. And Red says a lot of other guys around. That's another way of saying wouldn't have cared if you'd fired anybody else. Look at all these other people you got around. Could have fired any of them and saved my salary, and I'd still be there. This is the same thing that a guy says when he gets pulled over for speeding. And there was a bunch of other cars, and he says, I wasn't the only one that was speeding, but you only pulled over me. And the cop has to tell him, I can only pull over one person. There's only one of me. And then Red says, I thought that I was more important to the organization than they were. But I guess I wasn't. That's another thing that people who are breaking up in a romantic relationship say. It's all about laying a guilt trip on the other person. About saying it's your fault that this didn't work out. It wasn't ever mine. It's your fault that that you've done this. That we have this distance between us. So again, Red's refusing to take any responsibility for the fact that they're both on a phone call and they used to be friends, but now they're in a verbal combat. And then Red says, but I am glad that I found that out. But she's just echoing himself now. He's spiraling. His thoughts are just circling in the same pattern. He's getting angry. And Elvis says, well, it was just an unfortunate situation. It's just down to starting to get back on his feet. My daddy lost weight down to 165. So Elvis circles the conversation himself back to his father, who Red scared while he was sick. And he's saying, my daddy was down to 165, Red. I had more important things on my mind. My family was on my mind. You're accusing me of having hurt your family. Where do you think my mind was? It was on my family. So Elvis is trying to wake Red up here. Again, he doesn't blame Red for anything. He says it was an unfortunate situation. He tries to remove the responsibility from everybody's shoulders. Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much for coming. And Tammy says Elvis owed no one an explanation. He didn't. But here he is on this call, and he's offering one to Red. Red, my daddy was sick. I was concentrating on my family. You know how this feels because you just told me that you're angry, that I hurt your family. And I said, maybe I didn't consider that. Which means I tried to, again, take your feelings into account now that you've told me. Maybe I wasn't considerate. But Red has again attacked. And Red says, yeah, you mean now? So he does have at least some little bit of concern for Vernon. And Elvis says he's up to 170 or 180 or something. It was just the shock. You know how I feel. You know how you feel about your daddy. Or how you felt about your daddy. Now that's an open wound for Red. Because he loved his daddy. And his daddy died. And it was right at the same time as Elvis's mother. So they shared that grief in common right at that moment. And Red says, yeah, that's right. Well, so let's listen.
I'm still young enough, I can find something else, But it was just cutting down on expenses. I just couldn't understand that. There's a lot of other guys were in. I thought that I was more important to the organization than they were, but I guess I wasn't. But I'm glad I found that out. So, well, it's just an unfortunate situation. It's just now. Starting to get ready to sleep. My daddy lost on 165 now. Yeah. You mean now? Starting to get ready to sleep. My daddy lost on 165 now. Yeah. You mean now? Well, he's up. One. 78. Yeah. That just shot out and scared me. You know how I feel. You know how you felt about your dad. Yeah, that's right. Well, suspicion. Yeah, it was cast on the school. I couldn't figure out the source of suspicion. It's like that song that we did before. They have suspicious mind. Yeah. So,
And there is another dial tone that pops up. So there's been several times these dial tones have interrupted the call.
maybe I did.
Now, if you listen right there, you can hear this click, 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 click. That's a rotary phone. I'm going to back up just slightly.
Roughly first movement without thinking. Yeah. Well,
So did you all hear that tap, 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 tap? That has got to be a rotary phone.
Sonny was never around. Yeah. We talked about that. Yeah. He played golf. He never, shared anything with us. I got
So Elvis says suspicion was cast on this group, and I couldn't figure out the source of it. So what group is Elvis talking about? Suspicion was cast on this group. Is that the whole inner circle, or is that just the three guys? I think it's got to be Elvis's whole organization or his inner circle. And he says, I couldn't figure out the source of it. So I think he's telling Red that it's internal. I knew it was somebody in the group that was causing dissension in the group. Suspicion, it's like that song that we did. Can't go on together with suspicious minds. So Elvis ties it back to his own song. And he says, so maybe I did act abruptly, first to admit it without thinking. I think now he's playing out the song. He's recognizing that could have been some on his side. He might have responsibility for this. That he considered that maybe he acted abruptly. And he re-looked at his actions. And that he was the first to admit it without thinking. That maybe he'd done something in the spur of the moment and it had repercussions. And that he has to think that way because there's always people around that are going to take whatever ripple he starts in the pond and they're going to amplify it so it makes it all the way to the shore every single time. And so one little mistake, and that could have been his fault. So he thought about it. And he says, Sonny was never around. So I think Elvis is saying now, I'm looking for whoever was the source of this suspicion or this dissension, this problem with alignment within the group. Who is causing the misalignment? And I'm noticing Sonny, well, he's never around. Elvis says, we talked about that. And he's talking to Red, saying, you and I discussed the fact that Sonny wasn't spending enough time with the group. I think Elvis is also saying, Red, I discussed with you that another of the group was not spending enough time with the group, hoping that you would apply the lesson to your own behavior and understand I was in code in order to save face for you, saying, Red, you are not spending enough time with the group. Because he's discussed, so Red knows what the expectation is. And Elvis is openly saying Sonny wasn't meeting that expectation. He says, Sonny never shared anything with us. I got no use for that. I'm not sure what he means by shared. I don't know if that means part of what he earned or his experiences or he wasn't staying in touch. But whatever it was that Elvis felt tied him to other people, whatever made them special friends, Sonny was not maintaining that. And he drifted away, and that's what Elvis is stating here, that Sonny wasn't actively being a part of the group, and that Elvis doesn't have time for that. You have to have a defined role. So you got guys like George Klein, they're not on the payroll. That's a defined role. George comes and goes, but he is expected to come and go. Sonny's on the payroll. He's not expected to come and go. He's expected to be there. And Tammy says that she's sure that Red, Sonny, and Dave gave Elvis a good reason to fire them. And that probably Elvis had been paying attention for a while. I think that's what he's telling us right here, Tammy, that he has been paying attention with Sonny. Sonny's not around. Tammy says Elvis wouldn't have fired them unless he had a good reason. And Gunn says it seems like Elvis thought the three of them did not do their jobs and is just telling Red now. I think that's true. Although there's a discussion right here that they had talked. Now, it had been about Sonny. But that is a coaching method in human resources today. It's hard to talk directly to a person about their own behavior because they get very defensive. And so sometimes you have to approach them in a roundabout way. And Elvis was mixing friendship and business. So this was difficult. Now Elvis is about to tell us about Dave Hebler. And Gunn says that Elvis only expected them to do their jobs while he was in pain.
Tried to bully his way through. The scare tactics. Something guys. Well, they would ask questions.
So whoever's in Red's room or whatever Red's doing, it's like they've totally forgotten they've even got the recorder on. It's like some kind of Three Stooges comedy going on in that room at the same time that they're taping.
And they never could get a straight answer. They turned down every corner. That's all we could find out. I know, I reflect back, I know when I was 21 years old, shit, and my mind was just scattered to four winds. Yeah. I know some kind of guidance, and some things just weren't being done. Things weren't being done.
So Elvis says Hebler tried to bully his way with scare tactics with some of the young guys. In other words, Hebler was unfriendly to other people in Elvis's employ, and that they might have asked Dave for help and such. And it feels like, and that's not what Elvis is saying here, but that Dave was giving them answers like that's not really his job because he's the bodyguard. And so Elvis brings in Dean. He says they would ask questions like Dean, and they would never get a straight answer. So Dean is Dean Nikopoulos, who is Dr. Nikopoulos' son. He's a racquetball champion. And he's employed by Elvis as a valet. Same job that Al Strada has. They take care of Elvis's clothes. They take care of his personal requests. They make sure that his day is going well. And when Dean or Al come to you as another employee and ask you questions, most of the time it's because Elvis wanted the answers to those questions. So I don't know exactly what Dean is asking of Dave, but Dave doesn't give straight answers. He makes things difficult. He's not easy to work with. And Elvis says they got turned down at every corner. Well, that means that Dean or Nick, they needed some kind of physical help. Dave's a strong man. And Dean and Nick, they're constantly moving around these big trunks of clothes and other kind of heavy objects that Elvis needs moved around, or they just need to carry some suitcases downstairs. And they may have asked Dave for some help like that, and basically he refused. Now, the expectation in the organization, which has been referred to by Red, the expectation is that when one of the members of the organization asks another member for help, that help is given. Or it's at least facilitated, like they go find somebody who can do the help. But Dave is basically just refusing. That's what I'm reading here out of what Elvis is saying. Now, of course, some of that is speculation. But it sounds like, as Hebler's employer, Elvis is not happy with the amount of teamwork that's going on. And Elvis says, that's all I needed to find out. He says, like anyone else at 24 years old, my mind was scattered to the four winds. And so Elvis is saying, when I've got two employees, and one is the younger one, and one is the more mature, older individual, my expectation is the older, mature individual will model the behavior that's expected of the organization. That teamwork is required. And that when one of the young guys says, I need some help, then the older gentleman will help at the same time training the younger one. This is how you would do this without needing help. Or this is how you think of this in advance and you line up the help. But that leaders, they see a learning opportunity when the young or the inexperienced say they don't know what they're doing or that they need help. That's what needing help is. It means I don't know what I'm doing. And Tammy says that Red was there to do his job and not be a slacker. And Gun's asking, does Elvis suspect he's being recorded yet? Well, he's given us several kind of hints earlier on in the call that he does believe that he's being recorded. Now, he never says it outright, so we just can't be sure. But Tammy says people can't seem to separate the difference of being a friend and doing your job, and that friends come after the job is done. I think that's encapsulated in taking care of business. And Gunn says they should know that if they got paid, they had a job. Tammy says that helping these other people, that's part of the job description. And that if you slack at your job, you get fired. And Gunn says maybe they thought Elvis didn't notice. But I believe both Elvis and Vernon noticed if they did a good job or not. I think you're right, Gunn. Elvis and Vernon aren't blind. They may be distracted from time to time. But not everybody has the disillusioned outlook that these three guys had. So some of these people truly still love Elvis. And guys like Dean and Al, they're just telling it to Elvis like it is. I couldn't get this thing down the stairs. Nobody would help me. I tried to wash your clothes, but I ended up bleaching them out too much because the guy wouldn't tell me, I have no idea what they asked for help with. Maybe they couldn't get a car started or something. But it sounds like Hebler was in a bad mood a lot of the time. Or he's just slacking. And Elvis says that kind of guy, some things just weren't being done. And Elvis is very clear when he says that. Some things just weren't being done. just little things just weren't being done. Elvis is saying the details weren't being attended to. And that when people love to be around Elvis and they love to be working for Elvis, that they will go out of their way to look for those details. Now, one thing that might be happening is at some point I'll begin to show you various items that are out there from the auction markets. And they have similar stories, which are they were left behind by Elvis in a hotel room. Well, how could anything be left behind by Elvis in a hotel room? Elvis has people that go in and they clean it for him, like Dean and Al. So it sounds like there was so much going on, and people that were not keeping their eyes on the ball, perhaps not just these three gentlemen, but not everything was getting cleaned up because not everything was making it back to Elvis. And we'll see that soon as I bring out more and more stuff to show us. Let's listen to some more of this phone call.
You know how to transfer the service, regimentation. Doing the same thing every day. And I mean, we knew by God, you know, you did, and the service, anybody else that ever really served legitimately. That back at 7 o'clock, we had to do this, 3 we had to do it, you know. Yeah. And they do that by repetition. Sure. That's how they train. And all of the energy you without proper guidance is wasted. Yeah. So one reason, I mean, I just felt it that I should talk to you and let you see my side of it. Yeah.
So Elvis says some things weren't being done, just little things weren't being done. You know how they train you in the service? Regimentation, doing the same thing every day. And we knew by God you did in the service what everybody else did. They served. Elvis is saying here that everybody that started in 1960 with him, when he came back from the service, almost all of them had served. Even if they hadn't served with him, like Sonny had already served. Red had already served in the Marines as well. These people had all been through the training of the U.S. government, the U.S. military. So they knew how to train people. They knew what their jobs were. They knew how to get their jobs done on time. So even though they slacked off in the early 60s and they got yelled at a little bit by the colonel, all they had to really do was just kind of shape up a little bit to what they had already learned in the service. But these new people that Elvis brings on board, they do not have this experience. And so Elvis's expectation was that those older guys in the group, that they were going to take these younger guys under their wing and say, hey, we need to have this done by this time. You need to have this done by this time every day. And if you structure your day like this, it's just all going to get done. But Elvis is saying that basically these guys were left to fend to themselves and that Elvis himself doesn't have time to train them. That he's never even really done their jobs. These other guys have all taken turns at being his valet for a day or so at some point when the valets weren't around. So they know what needs to be done. And that Elvis has to keep his eye on the TCB ball because that's where the money's coming from to pay everybody. And that every time he has to take his eye off this other ball, the career, to pay attention to the organization everybody's losing money. And so some people have to be let go. And that's Elvis's side of it. He says all that energy of youth without proper guidance is wasted. He's saying, Red, where were the three of you while the others were running amok? And we had all this energy that could have been put to good use. Nobody had to complain about anything because these guys would have done whatever we needed them to do. They just had to be pointed in the right direction. So it's not like Elvis was asking anybody to work more. He's asking everybody to work smarter. And he felt like it should have already been done. Now, in an organization, will things be done if the leader doesn't say that it's important to him that these be done? Well, no. So Elvis might have had an expectation of Red and Dave and Sonny that they didn't know. Although Elvis has said he did talk to Red about Sonny's behavior, which would indicate Red did know the expectation. Now, did Red know the expectation was for him to pass that on to others? Maybe not. Maybe that's where they were lacking. Or maybe these guys just didn't want to be part of the deal anymore. And that's what Elvis sensed, and that's why he let him go. But Elvis says, for that reason, I just felt that I should talk to you to let you see my side of it. And then Red's going to tell him about basically how he doesn't see Elvis's side of it. But we're going to get to that part in the next episode, because we've looked at a lot of this and gone through it for today. We've taken that beating with Elvis as he's tried to again connect with Red. And Tammy says that Elvis wasn't their babysitter. He had his things that he had to do, not watch over children that are grown men. And Gunn says that these are spoiled children. They certainly weren't going out of their way to help the organization. And so once Red brings up the organization, Elvis starts to tell him how business is supposed to work. But Red he's not really going to hear this part either. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here today and going through this phone call with me. And I hope that you'll return for the next episode. Make sure that you that you're subscribed so you know when the next episode is. It'll be 3 p.m. tomorrow, Eastern Standard Time. Every day I do a show 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until I see you all again, you all keep on taking care of business. This is He Gave Away His Heart.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian soup, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfolds. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke, then sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, he stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight. Then back behind, the velvet door. He gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shapes from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He gave away his soul in Vegas mirth. Not just a king, but something more. A man who knew what hearts were for. Gave away his heart, not just a soul. Pieces of love where the brave belong. Ritual gifts from the man backstage. He saved the hurting, hid the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I'll never be the same. I was there, I saw the rings, I saw the light. Gave away his heart, and it burned.